Ji for his persistence over the past 2 years in encouraging me to come here and to be with you again. I've been wanting to do that for a long time, and especially wanting to see your new center here. It's been that long since I've been here. When did the center open?
Almost 1.5 years.
Okay, so it's been that long since I've been here. The center feels very wonderful. Can really feel the presence of the masters here and feel the blessings also of Swamiji. So I'm glad to be here and to spend this day with you. After the Satsang, for those of you who would like to stay, I will have a class also on some of Master's teachings. Our scriptures say that among all the blessings we can possibly have, there are 3 that are the greatest. And the first one is to have a human body, because only in a human body is the nervous system highly enough developed for us to be able to realize the infinite spirit. The second blessing is to follow a true teaching. Not all teachings are true. Not all teachings lead to the highest goal. And it takes a lot of good karma and many incarnations of sadhana in order to find and to follow a true teaching. And the third blessing, we all know, is to have a true guru, is to have a Satguru, one who himself knows God, is one with God, has followed the spiritual path all the way to the end, and who has come back in order to serve as a guide and a pole star for his disciples. So all of us here in this room today are thrice blessed because we have the human body, we are following a true teaching and a true master. Does this necessarily mean that we're going to find God in this lifetime? We have a good chance, a very, very good chance. But we want to make the most of all of these 3 blessings. We want to honor God in the physical form, in our physical form as well. We want to take care of this temple. Yogananda used to say, keep the body fit for God realization, the body temple. And in the class this afternoon, we're going to be talking about precisely that. We want to deeply appreciate and go as deeply as we can into our spiritual path, because it does lead us to God realization. If we follow the teachings, if we make the most of them, if we appreciate them, if we make them a part of our daily lives, not just momentarily or not just when we're meditating, but throughout the whole day, every year. And we want to learn more and experience more about the teachings and the path that we follow, and that's why all of you come here, and that's why we have this temple. Today, I'd like to talk about our gurus and about their disciples, who are us. Coming soon, in the next week, are 2 very special days. It's the Mahasamadhi of Guruji, and then what happens 2 days later? Who knows? No?
Sri Yukteswarji's.
Sri Yukteswarji's Mahasamadhi. So Sri Yukteswarji passed on the 9th of March in 1936 when Yogananda had returned to India, and although he was not there at the moment of Sri Yukteswar's passing, he came very soon thereafter. And Guruji passed on the 7th of March in 1952, during the time when he was giving a talk to honor the Indian ambassador to the United States, and this happened in Los Angeles. Let's take a look at the qualities and the characteristics of a guru. Because if we can perceive what it is that a guru is, how he thinks, how he acts, we will have a key to our own self-realization. And this is exactly what Arjuna asks Krishna early on in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, "Oh Krishna, please tell me, can you describe to me, how does a realized being, a perfected being, a sthita prajna, how does he look? How does he walk? How does he act?" And many times during the discourse of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna responds to this. And I'd like to read one of the verses from the 13th chapter, when Krishna is telling Arjuna, "When the yogi, the perfected being, sees all beings as contained in the One, having expanded his consciousness and sympathy to include all living beings, he merges into Brahman." I want to read that again. When the yogi, the perfected being, sees all beings as contained in the One, having expanded his consciousness and sympathy to include all living beings, he merges into Brahman. Swami Kriyanandaji, in his comments on Gita, in the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, gives this very short comment. A practical aspect of the teaching in this stanza is something that Yoganandaji said. Don't think you can love God purely and entirely if you are able to treat even one human being unkindly. The one Lord is equally present in all. To mistreat or even to feel ill will toward any of his creatures is, at least to that extent, to separate yourself from God. I just read a story, and it's about a Maharaj of a little kingdom somewhere, sometime in India. And this Maharaj fell ill, very ill, and was getting more and more ill, and everyone was despairing. And of course they had all of the best doctors come to diagnose and to treat him, but nothing was working. And his elderly mother was very desperate, also of course his wife and children. But there was nothing to be done. The doctor said, he's going to pass. Well, that day there came to the palace a mendicant who was actually an avatut. He was a very great saint, but he was dressed as a beggar. And he knocked on the door and said, I've heard that there is something untoward here. Can I be of help? And they said, no, that's not possible. The Maharaj is going to die, and there's nothing anyone can do. And the avatut said, but let me come in. You know, perhaps there is something I can do. No, they said. I mean, how is it possible you, a beggar, could do anything for our king? But the Queen Mother was passing by, and she heard this conversation, and she was so desperate she ran out to the mendicant, and she said to the guards, please let him come in. Perhaps there's something he can do. So he sat down in the bedroom of the king, and he looked around. And he looked up above the bed, and he saw something like this, a circle that had been plastered over. And he said to the people there, what is that? Why is there plaster there? And they said, oh, the pigeons, were coming in, and they were making the king's bed dirty, so we plastered it up. He said, if you want to save the king's life, we must open that, because there's a pigeon up there, and he's dying. So they went to work and they opened it up, and sure enough, there was a pigeon. And he was almost on his last breath. And the Avadhut said to the Queen Mother, you take this bird and you feed it and you take care of it. And if you do, the king will get better. And minute by minute, as the life came back into that pigeon, the king got better and better until the bird was healed and the king was healed. And the Avadhut said, don't you see that the one spirit is in all? And what we do to the least of God's creatures, we do to ourselves. So a great master, an illuminated soul, is one who actually sees and feels everyone and everything as a part of himself. Swami Kriyanandaji, in his autobiography, The Path, tells this one instance when they were transplanting trees at the lake shrine, when they had just purchased it, and they were moving a tree. You remember that? And it was heavy, and they dropped it. And Master said, what are you doing? Can't you feel it's alive? So this is the consciousness of a master, that everyone is exactly like himself, and everyone is in his own way, in his own time, seeking God. Swami Kriyanandaji, when he was visiting Assisi one time, he was living here then, but he was visiting us. He went to Florence, which is a lovely city, not very far away from Assisi. And he was there and spending the night in a hotel, and he had a wonderful vision. I think one of his deepest spiritual experiences that night in that hotel. And in this vision, he saw all of humanity, each one by one, and all of humanity. And he could see in their hearts that they were seeking God, that they were on the path, that they wanted more, that they were seeking fulfillment. And he felt this overwhelming love. Not a personal love, not his love, but he felt the love of God for every one of those souls. And I believe, I'm not sure that my chronology is right, but this was an important moment in his writing of the book, God is for Everyone. That was his editing of Master's first book, The Science of Religion, but he called it God is for Everyone, and I think it was because of that vision. And the Italian edition of the book, again, I don't know if this is really cause and effect, but it has a picture of Florence on it. I think for him to commemorate the moment of that vision. Many years ago, when I was living in Ananda village, and I was in charge of our organic gardens, and gardening is very difficult work, and it takes a lot of people and a lot of commitment. And there were people who would come, to help in the garden, and very often they wouldn't be very helpful. And they would just stand in the sunshine, and it was nice, and they'd sit down, and or just stand there. And I was often, well, I must confess, rather irritated with them, because we were growing food for the community, and at that time, it was almost all we had. So I was sometimes, what should I say, brusque with them. Come on, what are we doing here? And so, but I didn't feel good about my attitude. So one day I was sitting next to Swamiji. We were eating somewhere. I mean, actually, I can still see the place where we had been invited to the ashram. I think it was Dr. Chowdhury in San Francisco. But in any case, I was sitting next to Swami, and the other people were distracted at the moment. And I said to Swamiji, I said, Swami, please help me. How can I be more kind? And his answer surprised me. I was looking for something immediate and practical. And he said, when you have found God, you will naturally be kind. I said, yeah, but when will that be? But I meditated and have been meditating on that. And it's so true, isn't it? Because one who has found God is naturally embracing, is naturally tolerant, is not irritated, is not agitated by others. If you would, I'd like to read a couple other verses from Bhagavad Gita. This is from 6th chapter, and Krishna says, the yogi who is blissfully absorbed in the wisdom of the self views with equal mind a clod of earth, stone, and a bar of gold. He is a supreme yogi who gazes equally upon patrons, friends, enemies, strangers, peacemakers, those who cause trouble, relatives, right after those who cause trouble, the virtuous and the ungodly, whether they treat him well or badly. Uninfluenced by honor or dishonor, equally gracious towards friend and foe. Let's think about what Krishna is saying relative to us. Because we are part of that humanity that Swami saw in his vision. We are on the path towards self-realization. So let's evaluate our own minds and hearts in our own lives according to these signs of the perfected being. Are we able to tolerate those who don't tolerate us? Are we able to be kind to those who are not kind to us? Are we able to appreciate those who think differently than we do, who have a different approach, who have a different way, who, here's a personal story. My husband, Arjuna, who sends his greetings to all of you today, years ago, we would travel together to give programs. And one of the things, practical things that we had to do was to do the accounts, of course. So how many books were sold and the money that came in and the seminar and so forth. There were just the two of us. So I usually did that part of it. And it was fine. I like numbers. I have fun with numbers. But so does my husband. I mean, he's a great manager. So on this one trip, I decided, okay, Arjuna, he can do the numbers. And he drove me crazy. Because he just did them in a completely different way than I did. I mean, totally. He would always start with the money we had in the purse, and then go backwards. I would always start with the money we should have in the purse and figure out what went wrong. Okay. So I was getting more and more irritated. So I started running my own figures. And they came out exactly the same as his. And I realized he just started from a different angle, but he came to the same place. So then I just backed off and said, he has his own way. His own way. I'll tell you another funny story about us. You might have heard this one. It was about the day we were married. The day after we were married. So the day after we were married, and Swami Ananda married us. It was in 1975. We've been married for 41 years, going on 41 years. And this day was the most important day of those 41 years. So we wake up in the morning, And he has everything fresh, everything new. So we go into the bathroom, and he had already been there, and there was this nice tube of toothpaste, one. And he had already brushed his teeth and washed and everything. So I went to brush my teeth, and I picked up the tube of toothpaste, and I saw that he had squeezed it from the center. And I said, oh no. I said, no, we're going to start this marriage the right way. Because everybody knows that you squeeze the tube from the bottom. Okay? And slowly you go up and you roll it, you know, and then you squeeze it. So I picked up the tube of toothpaste, and I turned around to go back into the room, and I was going to tell him something. But I couldn't move. I mean, really, literally. I mean, just like that story of Master, you know, when he met Sri Yukteswar, I mean, it wasn't quite as cosmic, but it was similar. So I've got the tube, and I can't move. And so I hear Master in my head, and he's saying to me, very sternly, Shivani, in what scripture does it say that you need to squeeze the tube from the bottom? So I stood there and I said, it's not in the Bhagavad Gita, it's not in the Quran, it's not in the Granth Sahib, but, you know, they don't talk about toothpaste. So I just turned around, I put it down, never said anything. Later that day or the next day, I went to town, I bought my own tube of toothpaste. And he can squeeze it where he wants, and I will squeeze it where I want, and we've had 41 very happy years together. Sometimes it happens, like right now, when we're traveling, that we have one tube of toothpaste. I squeeze it in the middle, for respect, because that's how he does it, and that's how he likes to do it. Is this important on our path to self-realization? I think it's very important. There's great evil in the world today. There's tremendous evil, and that evil has a word, a definition: intolerance. People all over, no matter what kind of government it is, people are intolerant of others who have different beliefs, different ways, who dress differently, you know, can wear a veil or not wear a veil, or a kippah, or... And it's frightening, isn't it? It's frightening. I mean, suddenly the world has been taken over by the crazies. And what's going to happen? But if we look inside us, we must admit that we are intolerant. Because the critical mind keeps us away from this experience that we are all one. And the mind is always critical. I've been watching my mind just in the last few days, you know, just to see how well I'm doing. And without my will, against my will, my mind will criticize. You know, just in little things, you know. Look at, we were just in Rishikesh, you know. Look at those swamis, they're just sleeping, you know, all day. If I pass in the morning, I pass in the evening, they're always sleeping. You know, what are they doing? What kind of contribution are they making, you know, to society? Just almost moment after moment, the mind is judging and criticizing. And this is ego. It's trying to say, I'm better. I'm making a contribution to society. I'm doing something. What are you doing? It starts right there. I love how Krishna says, what he mentions, that we need to become tolerant about. Yeah, let me see if I can find it. Okay. he's saying that we must gaze equally upon patrons, okay, those people who support us in one way or another, friends, enemies. Enemies? Can we gaze equally upon someone who considers us an enemy? I'll tell you some stories later. To gaze equally upon strangers. I mean, the guest is God. We know that. But do we really experience that and live that in our hearts? To gaze equally upon the peacemakers and those who make trouble. We must gaze equally upon relatives. That's what I love. Because that's the hardest, isn't it? You know, really to be tolerant, to be accepting, to be giving and loving to those who are close to us. Because they're the ones who get on our nerves. With our, where they squeeze the toothpaste or whatever it is. To look equally on the virtuous and the ungodly. Are there ungodly people? Is there ungodliness happening in the world? There is. And tremendously, frighteningly so. But Krishna says to gaze equally. Because just as in Swamiji's vision, yes, even those people, even though they're not aware, are seeking God. Whether people treat us well or badly, we must gaze equally on friend or foe. Master was this way. We know that. Swami Kriyananda was this way. Swami Kriyananda tells the story in the path. He and Master and some other disciples went to a dance recital. Do you remember this story? And there was a Bengali friend of Master's who had been a bodybuilder, okay, and decided to become a dancer. Does anybody remember the story? It's a very funny story. And there he was, and he was big, hulky guy, trying to be a classical dancer. And he was representing a scene about a deer and a hunter. And he was both the deer and the hunter. And so at the end, the hunter kills the deer. And the dance went on and on. And it was terrible. And I mean, it was so bad that Swami said, Master was laughing so hard that he was crying, and the tears were flowing down his eyes. It was just absurdly bad. And then the hunter, kills the deer, but then he's not finished because he has to do his victory dance. So finally, they just start lowering the curtain. And Swami writes, and you can see his feet stomping off in anger. Well, afterwards, Master went back and he put his arm around, that person and sympathized with him and said, oh, they didn't treat you very well, did they? I'm so sorry. You put your best effort forward. He wasn't laughing at him. He was laughing just at the absurdity, of the human ego, that was manifest in that man. But he had all sympathy for this person. Remember when Master, when he was living in the ashram of Sri Yukteswarji, he always wanted to run off to the Himalayas. And remember one time he did. He went off and he spent some time there. And he hadn't even told Sri Yukteswar. He just left. And after some time, we don't know how much time, but Swami says it was probably a number of months, he comes back and is expecting a scolding from Sri Yukteswar. And Sri Yukteswar, perfectly calm, that even-minded equanimity of a God-realized soul. And Master said to him, Guruji, aren't you upset with me? And he said, how could I be? I have no expectations. How can I be disappointed in you? So you see, even when disciples transgress, the Guru and the God-realized person is all accepting. And this is what we want to become. And this is something very practical that we can do day by day, which is to look into our hearts, into our minds, and see what are the thoughts that are there. Are they thoughts of ahimsa? Are we really not doing harm by criticizing or judging other people or making ourselves seem to be superior? And this is a sadhana that we can do. And it's not easy, because it requires us to be vigilant every day, looking at our thoughts. Our meditation helps, because we can become kind when we experience God's kindness. We can become loving when we experience God's love. Swami Kriyananda was saying to me, I cannot give you a formula for being kind until you have experienced divine love. The true legacy of the gurus is not only what they have done, not even primarily what they have done. The true legacy of the gurus are their disciples. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, you can know a tree by its fruits. And Jesus says the same thing to his disciples. I would like to tell you a little bit about the last days of Jesus Christ, whom Master loved very much. And also his Mahasamadhi is coming up, which is Easter. And this year it happens at the end of the month of March. Jesus lived with his disciples for a very short time. It was only 3 years. Swamiji lived with Guruji only for a little over 3 years. And before the crucifixion of Jesus, it was on a Thursday, they had a dinner together, a supper. It was a ritual. It was a certain ritual. It was the Passover. And he was there with all of his disciples. And what he did and what he said during, it's called the Last Supper, is very worth reading. Very, very much so. And if you have a Bible, a New Testament at home, I recommend that you read it. It's in the Gospel of St. John, who was the most mystic and the most advanced of the disciples of Jesus. And you'll find it there. And I'd like to read you the advice that Jesus gives to his disciples. This is his final words, his parting advice to his disciples. I'm reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, and then 15 and 17. Jesus says many things, and really, you must read it. It's very touching. And he says, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And you also, as I have loved you, must you love each other. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. So we saw the marks, the characteristics of the Sthita Prajna. What are the characteristics of the evolved disciple? And this is what Jesus is telling us. People will know that you are my disciples if you love each other, because I have loved you. And Jesus goes on to say, as the Father, as the Infinite Spirit has loved me, I have loved you, and now I expect you to love each other. Not only does he say this in this gospel once, he says it 4 times. He keeps coming back to this theme of you must love one another. now in chapter 15, as the Father hath loved me, so I have loved you. Continue in my love. This is my commandment, that you love one another, in case they weren't getting it the first time. He's repeating it again and again. The last time, these things I command you, that you love one another. And this is something else he tells them at that dinner. You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, and your fruit should remain, that whatsoever you ask of the Father in my name, he will give it to you. So we don't choose the Guru, even though we think we do. The Guru chooses us. And he doesn't even choose us, because it's God who gives to the Guru the assignment for his disciples. But then Jesus says, and I send you out, that you bear fruit. So what does it mean to be a good disciple? We have two characteristics here. One is that we need to love each other. Master once said, it is the greatest sin to speak against another devotee. Think about that. Master also said there's no such thing as sin, but he used the word. So it's very strong what he was saying. There is no greater sin than to speak against another devotee, of one who is seeking God. So we start here, where we respect and love those who are near to us, dear to us, those who are in our home, our children, our relatives, the people with whom we're working. We begin to develop first tolerance, acceptance, and then love, and then love. Because the Guru loves us. And as Yogananda said, when somebody asked him, when you are no longer with us, Guruji, what can we do? And Master answered, only love can take my place. Only love. Because God is love. That is the experience. That was Swami's experience in Florence. This overwhelming expansion of his heart, of his consciousness, to embrace all creatures in love. So we are the Guru's legacy. We have in our hands and in our hearts, we have the assignment. The Guru has given to us. He's passed on to us his love. And he's asking us to go forth and bear fruit. To carry his mission forward. But what's his mission? Is it buildings? Is it schools? Is it hospitals? What is his mission? To know God. Self-realization. And we can know God when we begin to love ourselves, to accept ourselves as the Guru accepts us. It was astonishing, actually astonishing, how Swami Kriyanandaji could encourage everybody's strength. And when I mean everybody, we're talking about followers of this path all over the world. All kinds, different kinds of people. You probably see amongst each other and those people who come to visit how different people are. Different their approaches, ways of being, ways of speaking, ways of thinking. And Swami could encourage the strength and accept the weaknesses with no judgment. So let's hold this message in our hearts as we approach the week of the Mahasamadhi of Guruji, of Swami Sri Yukteswarji. And let me finish with one of the teachings of Swami Sri Yukteswar, one that I find so encouraging. He says, everything in the future will change when we make a spiritual effort now. So let's now, from this moment, from this day, resolve in our hearts to tolerate, which is just the beginning, to accept, and to love everyone as our own, as ourselves, because we are truly one in God. Jai Guru.